got a few critical promotions along in my career. And each time I was like a little young for those promotions, and I was a woman. So I was kind of panicked. I mean, people wouldn't see my imposter syndrome at that point, in terms of taking on those roles. But it was, I know at SAP, all of a sudden I had to manage all of the people. Like we had a team of 10 and I was one of them. And then they promoted me to take that team. So I was now managing all my peers that I'd just been working with.
That can be challenging.
And a lot of them, most of them were men that were older than me at the time.
That's hard.
That was pretty tough. So I did actually, I think we were joking about this the other, I would kind of make myself try to look older. I like cut my hair a little bit like more professionally. I wore very conservative, I just was like, I need to present. I was so nervous about appearing young because as a woman, you weren't getting the respect. People made a judgment call right off the bat about why you were in that job, who you were, and so those years were interesting.
Welcome to It Gets Late Early. I have a guest today that I'm really excited about because she is in a space that's called AgeTech. And this show really is all about the experience of getting older in the tech world, but we haven't yet covered this new burgeoning part of the industry that's called AgeTech. And so today I have Cathy Minter, who's the CEO of Wisdom.io, and has also had a long career in the tech industry, 25 years at this point. But now she's gone from sort of corporate big tech to being an entrepreneur herself. So it's fantastic to have you here, Cathy. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, Maureen. And thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
I mean, it's well overdue, honestly, at this point. So thanks for being here. So AgeTech, we got to talk about AgeTech. What is exactly AgeTech? Is it? Yeah.
It's funny. AgeTech is actually an industry probably formed about 5 years ago. You probably didn't hear the term AgeTech until 2016, 17. And it's actually an emerging industry or segment of an industry that's focused on technology, building solutions that really improve the lives for older adults. It's very simple in terms of the mission, and they've carved out, really, when you look at the demographics of what's happening with 10,000 people turning 65 every day, we've all heard in terms of what's happening with the shift in age demographics, within the US and globally. So this industry, you'll see, breaks into a lot of different segments. So AgeTech means a lot of different things, and we can talk about that later. But really, it's just an entire industry dedicated to building solutions. And it is, as they said on the tech side, mostly on the innovation software technology.
Yeah. And I mean, venture capital, of course, in the tech industry is all about innovation. And so it's good to see that they're recognizing, despite the fact that it's typically been a pretty youth-dominated and youth-focused industry, that they're looking at this as the market opportunity that it quite frankly is, right? As you mentioned, all the demographic change that's upon us, it's really swift. And there is so much, just to be maybe even a little crass about it, there's so much money to be made there. And that's what we're all about, right? Is increasing shareholder value in this world. That's kind of what it is. But you also have a really personal reason why you founded this company. And I think it'd be really great if you could share with our audience, what sparked the idea for Wisdom.io in your own life and brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. As I dove into some of the statistics around AgeTech, I actually learned that after I decided to jump in with both, feet into the wisdom world. So learning more as I go along, but having, as you said, I really started my career in software and technology in the 90s, believe it or not, with Oracle and some companies like SAP, so big tech. They were great companies, trained you really well. I had amazing, actually, management teams and learned a lot. Did jump into sort of the startup world around 2010, but I was working more recently as a chief revenue officer for a blockchain company. Actually, it's a distributed ledger company called R3. We were working with some of the largest banks globally, and I had a distributed team. It was a 24/7 job. I was traveling all over the world. We had a specific project in the Middle East, so I was on a plane going to UAE and Dubai every 6 weeks. And my father got sick. And my sisters, I have three, I'm the youngest of three girls, and my one sister was in California and my other sister was down in Atlanta. And it was all happening really quickly. And unfortunately, my dad, it was about 6 to 8 weeks, really took a turn and passed away. And we were left really trying to pick up the pieces from my mom and care for her. And that was the first signal that something needed to be done. I just had no resources. I felt as though, from a caregiving side, having been in technology, I couldn't believe the lack of technology to help people who have aging parents in their home or older adults in their home. That was the first. And it was during COVID as well. And I also recognized, having been in technology, everyone would call me to, Cathy, can you help me? Something's wrong with my phone. My settings don't work. Like the Zoom, like from everything.
Tech support.
It was always like tech support. I was like, what is it? The wisdom bar, no pun intended, or the genius bar. So I was getting a little upset just thinking, this is crazy. There is all of this great technology out there. We're using it all every day to help companies, to help businesses, to make money, yet we have this sort of population that feels underrepresented. And also the thought process around the user interface and how accessible technology was, how easy it was to use. I thought, who is designing this technology out there? And they're not really the empathy and the real understanding of what's happening. I just didn't feel it was there. So I kind of had it in my mind. And then, we were deciding to kind of reorganize and, decide whether I was going to move with the current company and all these other things. So anyway, I left R3 and never looked back, and found my co-founder for Wisdom, Dawn Newsom, who was kind of in a similar boat, coming from a long career on Wall Street, operations and technology. So we were kind of paired up, and as like the stars aligned, and we founded Wisdom early in 2024.
That's wonderful. I'm sorry you went through all of that. And to your point, I mean, it's something that quite so many of us are facing currently or will be facing in the not too distant future. And we need solutions. And what we've seen out there prior to the sort of the emergence of AgeTech is just kind of a willful denial and ignorance of what's going to happen to us. I mean, there haven't been, in my view, enough people of that age group or people who are thinking about the future involved in the tech industry and building those solutions, so that they didn't even necessarily know there was a problem, which is so ironic given that the tech industry is all about the future and innovation. But a painful way to come about the realization that we need this sort of a solution, but one that's going to have a very wide-ranging impact on a lot of people's lives, in my estimation.
Yeah. And to talk a little bit, because you asked about AgeTech, because it's an interesting industry. It's really compiled of, 10 to 15 different sectors within AgeTech. So everything from end-of-life planning to social connections to financial planning to senior living, accounting systems, to wills and estates automation, to Medicare, sort of caregiving services. So there's actually there was an AgeTech market map, which one of the kind of the think tanks comes out. It's called the Gerontologist. And that has more, when I first got into this business, I went in and looked at the number of logos that were actually, I was surprised. I think there's a lot of logos and people trying to do things in this industry. Wow. What I haven't seen in that list of logos, and maybe because the industry is so new, is that household name, like those real breakout successes. When you ask people certain things they can't really name, it doesn't come to top of mind, except for some, as we say, some of the older kind of legacy products that I think are still on the market. But it's a really exciting industry, and there's kind of an ecosystem that's building around it. There's venture capital, certainly, that's coming in. There's different analysts and people that are becoming, just like femtech or some of the other very specific, education tech. Like you can see, even before I was getting into the software and the startups, like kind of in the late 90s, 2000, it's the specialization and the segmentation that's happening more and more, which I think is good because you get very focused on people that understand what problems you're trying to solve for the specific industry. So AgeTech is a big industry, and there's a lot of different facets to it. We are in the smart home component of AgeTech, which involves some of the sensory, sort of the sensoring technologies and other things that are out there.
I'd be curious. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what Wisdom does. And like you said, I mean, there haven't been that many name brand logo type household names out there in this space yet. I mean, the only one I can think of is like, I've fallen and I can't get up, which is obviously like, I don't even know the name of that brand, but that's what I think when I think of, sadly, elder care. That's the first thing that comes to mind. So there's obviously a lot of room to grow in that way.
Yeah. And I think the industry hasn't been forced to innovate. I'm not sure why that is, but when I look around, it doesn't appear that some of the innovation has gotten mainstream. And we've evolved our thinking since we started the company, even in January, where we were really going after some of the caregiving, like myself. But in interviewing and talking and meeting with so many older adults, it's amazing that their voices have not been well heard in this conversation. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of companies sort of doing things for their parents. And I even had jumped into that in the beginning, like, I'm going to do something for my mom. Well, when I sat down with my mom, she has her own opinion on what she wants.
Turns out.
And, you and I will have that opinion also, because it's not too soon. I'm ahead of you, but we're adults that are going to have to deal with this as we age. We should be happy we're alive and living and planning for this. And it's just how you want to live your life and what challenges you're going to have in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Clearly, the demographics indicate that almost 90% of the population in the United States prefers to live in their own home as they get older. Whether that's just the United States, or there's a lot of factors around that. There's, number one, just they're comfortable in their own home. They might own their own home and they don't want to leave. People don't want to expend the expenditures. It's very expensive in the United States to move to a senior living. You're talking $5,000, $10,000 a month minimum. And it's just completely unaffordable for most. Even if you can afford it, if you're looking at a 401k or your retirement planning and you're trying to do your life expectancy and then how much you're going to be spending, it gets pretty scary in terms of that move when you might be living in your house that you own, right? And you're paying taxes or something. So it's financial, it's comfort. So people are digging in and they want to stay in their own homes and they want to live their lives as independently and free as possible in those homes that they own. And our messaging, interesting enough, has sort of changed from this aging, and we heard aging in place. Everyone wants to age in place. But when you talk to that older adult about the term aging in place, Maureen, it's pretty depressing when you think about that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm aging in place. It sounds terrible.
It really does sound bad.
But that's
not compelling.
It's the industry term, is aging in place. And I'm thinking, who made up that term, right? It's just terrible.
It's really bad. And you're a go-to-market person. You're a go-to-market girl. So, like, we got to shift the way we feel this, right?
And it just sounds like you're just sitting there waiting to die. So I've been so enlightened, and I've been having so much fun we've been having so many interviews and focus groups with older adult populations. I mean, I always tell the story about one of the women was in our focus group. She is in her 90s. She lives in Colorado. I'm a skier, so she's like an avid skier. And she's telling me the story about, like, she's living in her house and her friend. And she's like, you know what, Cathy? The only issue is I had to give up skiing in the trees this year. Right. And so I'm like, I want to be, she just was crushing it. Yeah. But so that aging in place, if you think about it, I asked one of focus group older adults, and she said, Cathy, it's just about living life to the fullest for the time that you have left. So we're like, exactly. Perfect. So how do you so everyone has these different challenges and things they have to overcome when you're living independently. And that's what we're focused on. Now, Wisdom is a smart home system, so we're just part of the solution. There's a lot of things you need to consider with your family, with your planning. There's home modification that could go in advance. There's like construction. We consider installing Wisdom a home modification to help you stay independent. But there's many things that you should be doing as a program, but Wisdom can help older adults that want to stay independent. Think of it like a force field around your home, either inside and outside your home. We have proprietary sensors, which is part of our secret sauce, which can detect falls without any devices. And also kind of have the ability to kind of have some activity, authorized sort of knowledge of activity, and if someone is safe and well in their home. If not, there's sort of a mechanism to bring in a circle of trusted people around them, and also escalates situations very quickly to an emergency response center and ultimately get help if needed. The device market, I think, is an interesting one as well. Now, this is part of AgeTech. There's, even for the younger population, wearables, devices, they're going crazy, right? Everyone is trying to develop the better device. I want to have a watch with a longer battery. I want it to be prettier. I mean, no one wears the lanyards with the medical alert. You might feel better buying your parent, a medical alert device, but if our focus groups are any indication, they are on the kitchen table as soon as someone leaves. They lose them. They hate them. They don't sleep with them. They might wear them to the grocery store, but if you fall at the grocery store, you're likely to be discovered. So 90% of these falls are happening in your home or around your home. It's kind of like what your parents used to tell you about a car accident, like put your seatbelt on, because most of your, if you're just running down to your friend's house, most car accidents are happening 5 miles from your house. The same is true that your falls are happening in the middle of the night. You forget something, you lose your guard. So we are trying to go after, and there's more things planned ahead, but keeping it really powerful, really simple, really easy, bringing a very easy user interface and experience is kind of what we're all about. So that's, we have a long way to go, but that's what we've embarked on, and hoping to get our early access product out at the end, by the end of the year.
Well, the mission's fantastic. And given that we both have a go-to-market background, I'm curious a little bit more about how you're getting in front of people, or how you plan to. I think that focus groups are incredibly impactful, I'm sure, and informing a lot of the path that you're going to have unfolding in front of you. But when I think about, for example, like we were discussing, how do you approach these people with a problem that a lot of us, frankly, we don't want to even confront it ourselves. We're in denial. I'm in denial that I'm getting older. Everybody is, because we've been told it's like the worst thing ever, which is why it's so great companies like yours are reframing and shifting the narrative to being about what vibrance can be ahead of you and excitement can be ahead of you and living life to your fullest. But how do you get people to have a conversation? How do you get people to click on your email marketing or see a billboard or whatever your go-to-market is, and get them to think, I want to confront this reality right now? And are you doing it through the caregivers of those who are older, or are you doing it to the actual end recipient of the services and solutions themselves?
It's a complex set of efforts. I would say I've been in sales for 30 years, and I can guarantee you the one way to get people to buy your product is to not talk about your product. So definitely don't lead with smart home system to me, you need to care about your customers and solve a problem, number one. So what is the problem? And educate potential consumers on things like what they care about and how to make their lives better. So and create a trusted, for me, the most important thing, and what I'm excited about as being CEO of Wisdom, is this opportunity to create a brand that is awesome. So trusted. I want to be loved. I want our customers to absolutely love us and trust us. So like, you have those experiences, and no customer will go unturned. Like I'm driving out to the first 100 customers or how many I can, making sure they love our product. We listen to them. Customer, my dad used to say, like, the basic, like, customer's always right. And it's true. Like, you just have to listen, modify, adjust. So part of it is building a world-class customer care organization. We want to staff that organization with older adults that might be in their second or third act, as I think you talked about.
Amazing.
For two reasons. One, I think they're amazing skills and from long careers, and the empathy factor and the ability to bridge the generations and understand, how to like be very patient and have those conversations that's necessary. So that's in our planning. Also, just, reaching out to other advocates within AgeTech, also influencers or thought leadership, and provide that education content to our subscribers. I started a newsletter weekly called Sage Space, and it has nothing to do with smart homes. It's just kind of a healthy living newsletter every week to talk about all sorts of different things, from hydration to we had the benefits of gratitude. That was last week's, and how positive thinking can help you live longer. So we're just we're trying different things, but right now we're pre-revenue as a company. So we are trying to build that brand awareness more than anything.
It sounds brilliant. I know what I'm signing up for right after this interview. So it sounds like a really great newsletter. Great. And I think, talking about what's going to be impactful to the community will draw people in. And then you provide them with a solution that, they didn't necessarily know existed. And that's, I think, a brilliant way to go about it and make this a little bit, more relatable, a little bit more fun, a little bit more tangible for people than just coming at it with, like you said, we sell a smart home solution for people who have this issue, right? And so
Maureen,
I think that's
I have a question for you and your listeners, because like you're at, in your, let's say, a generation, sort of like the generation before. And someone the other day I was talking to said, you're talking about older adults, but there's some, especially women, that might live independently, live alone and things. They're like, it's kind of just for adults. Could we just, where is that? Everyone is thinking about, it's such a scary thing to think about aging, but it comes quickly, right? So I'm just curious, when you think about this and some of your listeners, are they thinking about these kinds of things yet? Or are they just pushing them off? Like, I don't want to know about that, right? Until I have to, mostly probably for their parents.
Yeah, I would say that the majority of people in my audience at this point are thinking about this for their parents. I've talked to quite a few people in the audience who are dealing with these very same things that created the opportunity for you to go out and do wisdom.io, right? They've seen their parents go through this. They've seen their friends' parents go through this. They know it's coming. I have friends across generations, and I've seen them go through this. And it's heartbreaking to actually consider that this too will be what I have to deal with my own family members that I love, who are ahead of the game for me. So it's something that, I think people are coming to terms with aging a little bit. I think that there's a huge sort of momentum out there with talking about it more openly. It used to be something that we kind of shoved to the side. I think the fact that this podcast exists and your company exists are really good reasons to believe that it is shifting. And I do see it just in the mainstream media narrative more and more. So I think that there is a shift. So I'm hopeful that people will start being a little bit more forward thinking instead of in denial. But, the marketing is tricky. And I think the way in which you're approaching it is a wise one. I joke with people sometimes, like, starting a podcast about being older is a rough one, because people want to send it to other people, but then they have to be like, so you're older. I think you might like this, right? So it's a little bit tough. But I do think it's shifting. I think people are having sort of a pro-aging positivity mindset shift. And I think that will only continue. But yeah, I mean, it's not lost on me that these sorts of issues are going to be on my doorstep really soon. I think the toughest pill to swallow is that right now, a lot of the people who are in my particular age bracket, we have young kids, and we're dealing with that. Pretty soon, we're going to be sandwiched in between the caregiving for our parents and our younger children. So it's going to get real wild pretty soon. And so there's that sort of like sense that, okay, things are fine right now, but like the other shoe's going to drop at some point. So I do think about that from time to time. And I know people in my audience and my friend group also have that same sort of dilemma.
That the term, the sandwich generation, is a huge term at the moment. And there should be part of the AgeTech. Some of the companies are really going after corporate and employee benefits to help caregivers and employees deal with this, because it's not only, they've done a better job, I'd say, since, my kids were little, in some of the caregiving for children, right? But they have not yet really done this for older adults. So I do see a lot of advancement in that space also, which is great.
It is. And I mean, even just hearing you talk about the landscape of age tech, like it's a massive space. There are so many different ways that this touches our lives, right? Whether it's us directly or the people who we love and care for, who are in the generation above us, right? This is happening. And it does, it really kind of spreads out to all aspects. And so there is a huge possibility for, platform plays and partnerships that could really improve life. So I think it's a really interesting space to be in for the sort of the breadth and the importance of what these things will deliver for all of us as we all get older, right? Whether we're watching our parents do it first or not, and we're stepping into that. So I really think what you're doing is really awesome. And I think people are kind of moving towards having eyes wide open about what's coming. And again, like having a much more positive mindset about what it will be to be older in our world today. It's just so different than it used to be. Even if you look at media portrayals of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond, it's like a complete, like from Father of the Bride or Father of the Bride Part 2, right. It's like there's so much ageism involved in those movies, even just like super casually. And now you see people portrayed on screen and it's like they're living their best lives. They're killing it. And it's definitely moving in that direction. And I think we need just more representation and people out there doing the things that, we thought were impossible for people of a certain age, right?
Yeah, I think we'll see more companies put a more longevity lens on their marketing. So big tech or big companies you might see for home or for, like you'll start to see, because they need to wake up to the basic demographic economics of this, which is the population and the general, the GDP by 2030, I think I read that 70% of the US GDP will be in the population over 65 by 2030. So wow, where people are going and just the whole pendulum is shifting. So how those consumers spend are definitely different than Gen Zers and millennials. Yep. So there is a lot of effort to kind of unlock this market, and the companies that do this well will see a huge opportunity. And I do think these niche companies can come in first, but I imagine that legacy, there'll be more and more. It'll just be normal to have your big tech company or your big company and have just a perspective on the segment for that population and how to work with them, for sure.
I think so too. I think the companies that don't do that, I mean, it just like blows my mind, the hubris that it would take to be like, oh, I'll build a product for the 70-year-old age group and like not have anyone on staff who's in their 70s, right? Like it blows my mind that people would think that is the way to go. So what you spoke of, which was very deliberately having people of the older generations of your target market on your staff and in your focus groups, that's critical, right? Because you're going to make a much better product that suits their needs, and they're going to be able to speak to other people who are walking the same walk they are, who are in the same stage of life. And I just think it's not only the right thing to do just morally, but it's the sound business practice. And so I think larger tech companies, based on those demographic shifts, will need to keep up. They're going to need to have older people within their organizations in order to keep up with the demand for the jobs that they have to fill. So it's just a reality. And I think those that start working on that now are going to be much better off than their peers who are ignoring this.
Yeah, clearly. Exactly.
So you had a long career in corporate tech, and then you made a shift over into more of the VC-backed startup world. And I'd love to hear just, a little bit about what that was like for you. What was it like working in big tech and making that move, especially as you were older, into the more, in my view, youth-dominated venture capital-backed startup sort of world?
Yeah, I mean, I think back starting out, before Oracle, I actually spent a little time at AT&T through their training program. And I remember going to AT&T and they gave me a binder. First of all, it was a binder of acronyms for the telecommunication company at the time. This was a really long time ago. But also they gave me it was like a dress code. Like you had to wear a skirt. I had to wear pantyhose, closed toe shoes. Like you can go to Brooks Brothers Talbots, like, this suggested, of course, you're like entry level, salaries. Like, what are you crazy? And it was just, and you just did it. But that was only, I guess that was a while ago. But when I got to Oracle, I remember I really wanted to get into software. I had some friends at Oracle. It took me like a year to I interviewed at a couple of different places. I was like determined, like I'm getting hired at Oracle. And I went to work on their AT&T account. That's how I got in. And it was awesome. At the time, it was like Oracle was like the high flyer startup, not really startup, but it was still a really fast moving company. And I remember I could wear like a pantsuit. And that was like blown away. I was like, wow, this is amazing, right? Like
how
really
forward thinking.
And the internet was coming, right? This was in the late 90s. I'm really dating myself now.
It's all good. Love that here.
Oracle was an amazing place to get. They really had formal training programs. I spent 6 years there, which I say 24 end of quarters. If you're in software sales, you know what that's like. But I had amazing bosses there. Mostly men. There was one woman, I remember, Polly Sumner, who was like broke through like the glass at Oracle at that time. And then there was, I always like to tell the story. There was a woman that ran the forecast call, and they called it the wood chipper when you had to go onto the wood chipper on Fridays. So it was like hardcore. But anyway, it was like the beginnings of kind of Silicon Valley, that quarterly sales. And it was great. And I had 2 kids at Oracle. So I had both babies at Oracle, and they were really helpful and supportive. And I remember my bosses like wheeled in like a cake one day for like, it was a great environment.
That's awesome.
And so I had great times at Oracle. There was a big reorg that happened, and I got a call from SAP at that time, and sort of like going from Oracle to SAP, but a lot of us went over there, and they were just kind of coming in from the German market and trying to break into the US, which was interesting on their messaging as well. So all those years, Bill McDermott was there. If you know him, he's the CEO of, learned a lot from him. He was a mentor of mine.
I'm an ex-SAP girl too.
Oh, you were at Concur, right?
Yeah,
so I worked for Steve Singh, also at Docker.
Yeah,
he was my boss
Steve.
at Docker. So all these people were amazing. But personally, I got promoted very early at SAP to vice president. I was one of like 2 people. I was in my early 30s. Wow. And I think that we were talking about the age. This is sort of getting to your question. I remember I got a few critical promotions along in my career. And each time I was like a little young for those promotions, and I was a woman. So I was kind of panicked. I mean, people wouldn't see my imposter syndrome at that point, in terms of taking on those roles. But it was, I know at SAP, all of a sudden I had to manage all of the people. Like we had a team of 10 and I was one of them. And then they promoted me to take that team. So I was now managing all my peers that I'd just been working with.
That can be challenging.
And most of them were men that were older than me at the time.
That's hard.
That was pretty tough. So I did actually, I think we were joking about this I would kind of make myself try to look older. I like cut my hair a little bit like more professionally. I wore very conservative, I just was like, I need to present. I was so nervous about appearing young because as a woman, you weren't getting the respect. People made a judgment call right off the bat about why you were in that job, who you were, and so those years were interesting. And that kind of, and this goes to kind of where you are on this podcast, I would say that hit me. I got promoted to a president role when I was like 40 at one of the startups I went to after SAP. So I always felt like I was getting these jobs. Of course, I had kids. I was total, stressed out, like trying to do everything. Like that's a whole nother podcast topic.
Yes, it is.
But I then through my 40s, I kind of did X. And then all of a sudden I was like, now I need to actually start dialing this back to pure more youthful, right? Like it was like that last, like you're getting into that sort of late 40s, approaching 50. And I took, the job with R3 when I was 51. And that still, I was like, but it was starting to you could start to see kind of then the change in people's attitudes. And I never believed that would ever happen to me, like ever. I just never even, didn't even like dawn on me because I'd always been trying for so long to appear older. So now, right? It was like a shift. So, and I don't know what caused that. Maybe it was in my own mind, but I don't think so. And in some ways, because I had made it to the C-suite in those companies, and on these executive teams at some of the startups, you had to command that respect, and it was kind of you're with your peers, so it wasn't that much of an impact. But I did see it very much in many of the women that were in the sales ranks with me and who kind of remained in the sales ranks, kind of stayed in the sales ranks. That was much harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's funny because there is research to suggest that there's basically no good age to be a woman. You're either seen as too young or too old. Like there's no like right space. So it's funny because I always had, it's sort of mirroring what you're saying is that, initially there was a sense like I have to have this authority. I have to have this sort of this image, if you will, to be taken seriously because I was on the younger side. Right. And so I had that aspect in my brain. But then I also, at the same time, thought if I don't make it to a certain point on that career ladder by maybe 40, I'm done for because I don't see anybody who's older up there who's, not at that sort of VP or beyond level. And so I had this real fear. And I'm an ambitious person just anyway, but I think that a lot of it was actually motivated by my own fear and self-preservation, wanting to make sure that I could access those upper ranks of the company in order to preserve my proverbial seat at the table. Because first of all, there aren't very many women, right? And then when you do see them, they tend to be a little bit older, right? And then if you haven't made it, like you suggested, you saw people who are really struggling. And I was on the go-to-market side of the organization. And I think older women in sales have a harder time than older men in sales. And it's not fair and it's not right, but it is real. So it's interesting to me that you saw that even though you had gotten up the rungs of the ladder to the C-suite, because I've also spoken with other executives who made it up there and they don't see the problem because they've never experienced it. They've always made it, but there's a supply and demand factor and there's an individual contributor track that gets a little dicey as you age, right? So it's good that you saw the entire organization, you saw the entire situation, despite having gotten to a point where you were, I would have thought, more secure. But it's also interesting to hear that even you felt like there was a need to appear more youthful, even though you had that gravitas, that respect, and that authority of being at the C level in an organization. Like, wow. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
or there'd be, and it's funny because one of my old board members who I stayed in close contact with, he also was influential on the sales side. So he was somebody that I always would go for mentoring. And we were talking, he had a couple CEO roles and CRO roles. They said, if my best reps, bar none, like ever, were, I'll just say what it is today, sandwich generation women that are, because if you want something done effectively and time management, all of these things, and also the scrappiness and the value, a lot of why sales is a great career for many women. You're so busy, you're motivated, you're on a quota, right? So you want to be as your time management is as effective as possible. You can kind of juggle multiple things and kind of how to run a process. And most of some of I can say at my last job, my top performer was a woman who was older than me. She just absolutely crushed it. Now she, and I had promoted her to a leadership role, and now she's in another leadership role at another company. But
That's
she
awesome.
had not been promoted into you know what I mean? So the time, having that support, women championing other women, not to kind of talk about that, is really important as well.
It's so critical. It's so critical. But yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing. And I feel like it really does shift depending on what kind of company you're in, what kind of industry you're in. Mm-hmm. And, I wonder, what are your feelings about, I mean, I know you did not, for example, go the venture capital route with mm-hmm. Wisdom, but were you to have done so, how would you have approached it? Would you have thought about your age in this equation? Would it have concerned you?
Dawn and I had a lot of conversations about this. And of course, never say never because we're in our first year, but we have made a decision that that's not the route we want to go for big VC money. You know what I mean? Not the route we really want to go down, partly because we do want to have control, kind of maintain sort of control of our destiny here with this company over the next 10 years or so. And just the model today can be pretty brutal. And we know that 2% of venture capital goes to women. I don't even know what those statistics are for older, even though if you look at successful companies, the stats are pretty compelling about who's running a good company. So we're not overly worried about it. We're just running our playbook right now.
Yeah.
So we have actually, our investors are actually people we've worked with professionally, but women. So it's
there you go.
Kind of funny, right? And so we're looking at some other models going forward and trying to be we both come from long careers. So a lot of the sort of we are mentors for a couple of other companies. So I think we're looking at how do we get operationally profitable, run the business. And we do laugh because we make decisions pretty quickly. We have healthy arguments with one another, but we're like, you want something to get done, like give it to two women, right? And they're like go quickly. And we're two women over 50, so we sort of are embracing that and loving that. And also just because we're now in this AgeTech, it just felt really right. And like the stars were aligning in terms of going after this, and we'll see what happens. There's no guarantees, and we're having a great time. We're really enjoying it, and I wouldn't change anything about it right now. And we'll see what's ahead. But I encourage people out there. There is a second, third act. Don't just think about other things that you can do, other skills that you bring to the table. There's so many people I've talked to recently, just kind of doing that and thinking about that, and a lot of men too. I've talked to some of the guys I used to work with. So this is not just a problem on the age side for women, and men are getting hit equally hard in some areas. And it is a shame to like where you could blend. There's so much knowledge to blend the skill sets of sort of the Gen Z with this older population. And so I just encourage more companies to think that way.
Absolutely. And, Adobe came out with a survey recently where they were asking Gen Z, do you have a mentor and do you want one? And it was something like 84% of them wanted one and only 52% of them actually had them. So these mentors are in high demand and just not in very high supply at this point. Like there just needs to be a lot more emphasis on this, and it's going to benefit the company's bottom line at the end of the day to have better intergenerational collaboration and diversity of generations to bring people together. It's going to just make everything smoother, right? I
know it's funny. Gen Z gets a bad rap. I mean, I've had like all the teams, and I absolutely love the Gen Z employees that I've had. And even just having met other people within, like there is a different thinking, and the smartest, and actually all of the younger employees, I actually learn so much from. And so it kind of goes both ways.
It 100% does.
When you think about the digital divide, I always kind of give the example being a Gen Xer, right? I didn't grow up digitally native. So I wasn't born with a digital device. We had to learn it later, I think, and then much later, really, when it came to like cell phones. So like when someone hands me an Xbox controller, which I can watch like my son, just, it's just literally, I do not know how to work the next Xbox controller, like to turn on Netflix or whatever on one of the boxes that is there. Because you're not digitally native. And I feel like for older adults, even that next generation, so boomer and older, a cell phone, it's kind of the same experience, right? So how do you bring it's not that you can't use the device that you're comfortable with. It's just that you're not digitally native with that particular device. And then sort of what comes out is, they don't want to use technology, or they can't. And it's just such poor misunderstanding and lack
100%.
of empathy in terms of what's going on.
Totally agree. I mean, there's so much opportunity to just get people together and help one another out, and everybody. I mean, rising tide lifts all boats. Like let's pull together and figure out how to use all these various tools, and we're going to make a better product and a better company culture out of that. So it's a huge miss, and I don't know why companies aren't taking it more seriously. I think there will be, also with the advent of AgeTech, I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on generational collaboration in the workplace and making sure that there is age inclusivity. So I'm excited about what the future holds, because I think that it's going to be really a mandate for companies to address this. So I'm really thrilled about the work that you're doing. I think it's critically important for everybody who has aging parents, which hopefully is a lot of us, right, at this point, and needs to be looking out for what's going to happen in the either current present day or what's going to happen in the all too near future, right? These things come at us quickly, and life changes fast, and we need to be ready to meet the moment. So it's really good that there's going to be a landscape of age tech solutions out there, including wisdom, that are going to be there to support. So I'm really excited about the work you're doing and grateful that you're doing it. So thank you. Yeah, it's really, really awesome. So really, really thank you so much for being on the show too. Like, this is great to go from listener to, interviewee. It's amazing.
No, I think I give you, as I said before, when I kind of caught my eye, a few months ago with what you were doing, I was like, that's really brave. Number one, to kind of go into this topic and addressing it. I think it brings a lot of credibility to be addressing this at the point in life that you're at.
Thank you.
I applaud you for going after it and encourage more people to just take chances like that and go with their gut. Because I think that's what really it can differentiate on ideas also, just not kind of necessarily follow the path that's laid out, but follow your own. So
I love that. And on that note, is there any advice that you would give your younger self that you can share with us?
Just to slow down a little bit. And I know that sounds hard. I was reading an article about, if you're a mom, and this kind of is unrelated, but it kind of is related, is that a lot of anxiety in kids is caused by parents that are rushing. Ooh. So there's a correlation between, kids, I know, kids, but like everyone does, we're all get to school, get this, get that, but even just being mindful of that energy and trying to get to do all of the next things, and really, and I'm doing a much better job of it right now. And I think we were talking about all of the great things that you realize when you get over 50 that you didn't know. I could talk about that forever, and how happy you actually, it's a really happy time in your life because there's so much clarity and understanding you have for things. But let's say to the younger, just try to be present and take it a little bit slower, because it goes really fast. I mean, my kids are now like working in the city, and there's a whole new relationship, and it's awesome. But I know there were moments in time where I was, traveling, rushing around, trying to get here, trying to get there. So I know that maybe sounds obvious, but be a bit more mindful of that.
Thank you. I know I need to reframe my mentality around this. I mean, gut punch, but you're right. It's really important, and we don't want to be modeling that behavior for the next generation, because it's not really getting us places, is it? It's creating a lot of problems. So I think taking a step back and relaxing a little bit and making sure that we see the bigger picture, all of that's great advice.
Right.
So thank you.
And embrace imperfection, because I think I got a little better at this as I got older, in my 30s, but someone said to me, because I was like an executive and working, I had these kids and stuff, and they're like, Cathy, how do you do it all? Like, how do you do it all? And I was like, I don't. There's no, I'm not even remotely close to getting to actually having this all like well-oiled machine. Like it's a mess. So just kind of embrace the imperfection and focus on like really the important things and just kind of laugh at yourself. That is definitely a lifesaver there. And your friends.
I love that.
And some family. Lean on friends and family.
Absolutely. It takes a village, which is why it's awesome that in the United States, we typically are like, cool, here's a deserted island. Good luck.
Right. Right.
Hopefully that will change.
And there's a lot of really great innovation also in this area. So on the flip side to AgeTech, I think I do have one of my former sales reps started her own company on helping working moms. So I'm trying to like keep help her. But so it's balanced. I think it's great.
It's balanced. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show.
Well, good. Well, good luck, Maureen. And thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been fun and awesome.